Good afternoon and welcome to the Leadership with Vision training. My name is Lily, AZFBN's Agency Training Coordinator, and today we have Crystal Petry speaking with us for a second time. Crystal, in May of this year, did a session with us about diversity and inclusion among recruiting volunteers. Really great video. Please check that out on our YouTube page. Like always, that recording and this recording after this presentation will be sent to you along with the PowerPoint. So Crystal is a much sought after national speaker on a range of topics from inclusion, diversity, recruitment, retention, volunteer engagement, and social media training. She is the director of Golden Triangle Retired and Senior Volunteer Program, where she oversees close to 500 volunteers throughout Orange, Jefferson, and Hardin County. Just a few quick reminders before we begin. If you have any questions, please put your questions in the Q&A chat box or just in the chat box. We will address those questions at the end of the session. And if you are not presenting, please make sure your microphone is muted just as a courtesy to all the presenters and whoever is speaking. But yeah, I think we are ready to get started, Crystal.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lily, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for having me back a second time. I enjoy so much working with you. Now, one of the things I like to do whenever I'm doing presentations or trainings is I like for the audience to give me 3 words that start with the letter, we'll say E today. 3 words that start with the letter E. And my goal is to try and work those words into my presentation within the time allowed. So go ahead, put those words in the chat. Let me see what I'm getting. Some appropriate words, of course, some appropriate words that start with the letter E. I'll select 3 of them and I'll try and work them into my presentation. Okay, so we have empathy. That's an excellent one. Okay, energy. That's a great one. Okay, and excellence. Wow. You guys came up with some great E words. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do 4. I love the word enjoy. I love that word. So let's see. My 4 words. These are great words. We have empathy, energy, excellence, and enjoy. Let's get started. Okay, so the title of my presentation, Leadership with Vision. And of course, you can see that I spelled the word leadership a little bit differently, and I will get into the purpose of that. I actually did that on purpose because when you are leading, you have to have vision when you lead. Slide, please. And throughout this presentation and throughout the training, I will show you about leadership and we will talk about vision. The purpose of nonprofit boards and committees. The purpose of a nonprofit board is to set policy and make major decisions for the nonprofit. The entire board, as the governing body, is responsible for the nonprofit organizations and its activities. The board committee also helps to evaluate the nonprofit's progress toward strategic goals and initiatives. Slide. So now that we know the purpose of nonprofit boards and committees, I am going to get into the responsibilities of a nonprofit board and or committee. Now, there are several responsibilities of a nonprofit board, several responsibilities of a nonprofit committee, but I'm just going to focus on 2 for this training. The first one, to keep the nonprofit on a mission. And this could be difficult at times because there's so much need out in the world, in your communities, in your cities, that you really just want to help everyone. You want to try and do everything. But sometimes when you do that, you actually end up not assisting anyone and not helping anyone. So one of the major responsibilities of a nonprofit board and or committee is to keep that nonprofit organization on the mission. The second responsibility is to advocate for and in the community, which is very, very important to advocate for and in the community. So basically, as the members of a nonprofit board, a nonprofit committee, one of your responsibilities is basically to go out and fight for your community, to go out and make sure that the residents of your community are getting the best of the best. And that also is one of the major responsibilities. Slide, please. Now, most nonprofit organizations, most nonprofit boards and committees, they have mission statements and vision statements and bylaws and things like that. So I am going to read to you my mission statement, my vision statement, and a little bit of my bylaws that I created just so you can see what my mission statement is and what my vision statement is. So my mission statement for my nonprofit organization: the mission of the Golden Triangle, or SVP, which stands for Retired and Senior Volunteer Program, is to improve lives, strengthen communities, and foster civic engagement through service and volunteering. So, with all of our partner sites and with the overall program of RSVP, this is our mission. So, my job as director and with my nonprofit board is to make sure that all of these things are accomplished in everything that we do. So the events that we have, fundraising that we have, partnerships that we have, we always come back to this mission statement to make sure that the things that we are doing in the community stay in alignment with our mission statements. Slide, please. Now, the next one I'm going to read is our vision statement. The Retired and Senior Volunteer Program is to be the regionally recognized volunteer service placement organization using the resources and talents of those 55 and older to actively meet the emerging needs of the community while promoting and challenging the personal growth of the individual. The Golden Triangle Retired and Senior Volunteer Program will maintain an effective partnership with local, state, and national organizations to ensure visibility and continued program growth. And that is our vision statement. So the vision statement is, what are you doing? So what are you actively doing in your community that is going to make your community better? And who are you actively serving? So those things need to be in your vision statement so you will know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who you are doing it for. Slide, please. Now, the next one is just a snippet of my bylaws. I just wanted to give you guys an example of what I have written up for my bylaws. So from Article 3, this is under the membership category. Section 1, the Golden Triangle RSVP Advisory Council shall be composed of 16 to 20 members representing the nonprofit, public, and business sectors and the geographic and demographic diversity, and that's of our community. And another thing that I always say when I'm speaking with a potential member for my advisory council or to current members of my advisory council is to make sure that this is something that you enjoy doing. Make sure that volunteering is something that you enjoy doing. Make sure that giving of your energy and your time is something that you enjoy doing. Because if it's not something that you enjoy doing, then you will not enjoy being on the advisory council. So you have to have enjoyment, you have to have energy, and you have to have time in order to be on my advisory council. Now, I do have a question for the people that are listening and watching. What jumps out about my bylaws? Is there anything that jumps out to you about my bylaws? And you can put that in the chat, and we'll get those answers read. But I want you to tell me, is there anything specific that jumps out at you about my bylaws? So as you are thinking, as you are reading, and as you are typing, I would like to note that I've used two of my words already. I used enjoy and energy. Enjoy and energy. So members of your advisory council, of your executive board, have to enjoy what it is that you are doing and what it is that they are doing in order to be great, effective members. Is there anything that jumps out at anyone about my my bylaws? Okay, Paula says seniors maybe. Okay, Paula, thank you for that answer. Any other answers that jump out at you about this little snippet of my bylaws? And I'll read it one more time. The Golden Triangle RSVP Advisory Council shall be composed of 16 to 20 members representing the nonprofit, public, and business sectors and the geographic and demographic diversity. Okay, let's see here. Christina says 16 to 20 members seems like a lot of people. Very true, Christina. Very true. Let's see. Terry says number of members and who are representing. Okay, excellent, Terry. Excellent. These are some great answers. So the thing that I want you to pay attention to, and the thing that is jumping out or should jump out to you, is a single word, and that word is diversity. That word is diversity. That single word jumps out. Let's see here. Christina says, I like that they are supposed to be representative of a wide range of people and businesses. Yes, which goes back to that word diversity. That goes back to the word diversity. So that word is very important at all times in whatever space you are in. Whatever space you're in, that word is very important. Slide, please. I have that word diversity written into my bylaws so that my board will be diverse. This was discussed, it was voted on, and it was approved by my boards. And this is actually a scripture that really sums up why I wrote that word in my bylaws diversity. And it appears more than one time in my bylaws. The scripture says, write it out and make it plain so that he who reads it will run to it. And what that means is whenever you are dealing with diversity and whenever you are dealing with inclusion, you have to write it out and you have to make it plain. What I have discovered is most people, when they think about diversity or when they think about inclusion, that is as far as it goes. They just think about it. They don't make any actionable steps or any tangible steps to actually incorporate diversity, to actually incorporate inclusion into their board or their committees or even their volunteer pool. They just think about it, maybe talk about it, but that's as far as it goes. So I wanted to make sure and take it one step further than that and write it in my bylaws so that every committee member, present and even future committee members, will see that diversity is very important and that it is needed on my advisory council. Slide, please. So your first actionable step when dealing with diversity, when dealing with inclusion, especially when it comes to your advisory council, your executive boards, is to write the statement. Write it in your mission statement, write it in your vision statement, write it in your bylaws. You can have it in all three, you can have it in one, you can have it in two, but you have to write it out so that people know that this is a priority topic that should be taken seriously, so that people will know this is something that the advisory council is actually going to take action on. Now, when it comes to diversity and leadership and inclusion, I am going to tell you sometimes this is not the easiest thing. Now, yes, I am giving a training on this topic, but when I brought this topic to my own advisory council, I will be honest with you, it was not well received. There were just a few people who were used to the status quo of how the advisory council always looked, how they always thought, how they always spoke. And honestly, it's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people don't like change, but when change will bring betterment for your organization, betterment for the nonprofit agencies that you represent, then change is good. So when it comes to something like this, you have to be a leader, you have to be bold, and you have to be courageous. You have to have a vision knowing that diversity and inclusion will be better for your organization and will be better for your board and or council members. Slide, please. So again, that first actionable step is write it down and make it plain so that your advisory council members can read it and know that it is a priority. So whenever we talk about, or whenever you hear people talk about diversity and inclusion, you hear them talk about it as if it is the same word, as if it is one thing. But it is two completely different words with two completely different definitions. So I want to make sure that you understand the definition of diversity and the definition of inclusion because I use it a lot during this presentation. I want to make sure that you have an excellent understanding of the two words. Now, the first one, diversity. The practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders and sexual orientations. The definition of inclusion, the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those who have physical or mental disabilities and members of other minority groups. I want to really, really stress the last sentence in the definition of inclusion. A lot of times when we hear that word, most people think of people of color when it comes to inclusion. African American people, Hispanic people, Asian, biracial. But I want to make sure and include it and bring it to your forethought that people with physical and mental disabilities need to and must be included when it comes to diversity and inclusion. It's not just people of color that are marginalized. It's also people who have physical and mental disabilities that can be marginalized, but that absolutely need to be included in the conversation and in the discussion. Now, before I go to the next slide, can anyone, and please put this in the chat, can anyone tell me what is the similarity between those two words, diversity and inclusion? I have given you the difference between those two words. Can you tell me what is the similarity between diversity and inclusion? Go ahead and put that in the chat. I'll read it out. What is the similarity between those two words? They are very different. Their definitions are very different. And when we speak about diversity, when we speak about inclusion, we need to make sure that we are using them in varying ways because the definitions are very different. But I would like for someone, just if you can, a guesstimate, what are the similarities between diversity and inclusion? And I will give you a hint. The answer is in both of the definitions. Terry says including and involving is the similarity. Excellent answer, Terry. Excellent answer. Okay, anyone else? Anyone else want to take a stab at what is the similarity of diversity and inclusion? And your hint is it is in both of the definitions. Both of the definitions. Liz says getting a variety of opinions. Getting a variety of opinions. Okay. Excellent answer, Liz. Excellent answer. Do we have anyone else that wants to take a stab at it? A good guesstimate? A good guess on what it is. Christina says being aware of people who are in other groups than ourselves. All of those answers are excellent answers. All of those answers are excellent answers. Now, the one that I'm looking for, it's a single word in both of the definitions. And that word is the second word in each definition, practice. Practice. Oh, Christina got it. Christina got it. Practice. The similarity in both of the words, diversity and inclusion, is the word practice. Now, when you think about that word practice, a lot of people, especially me, because I am an absolute sports lover, I think about sports because you're constantly practicing sports. Constantly practicing sports. Now, my favorite NFL player of all times, and I feel like the best NFL player of all time, is Peyton Manning. I absolutely love him. And one of the things that he would always say, because people would always ask, you know, how are you so great? How are you so excellent? And he would say the key to excellence is practice. The key to excellence is practice. And the same is true for diversity and inclusion. In order for you to be diverse, in order for you to be inclusive, you have to practice that. No one is born with a diversity gene or an inclusion bone. It's something that we have to practice every single day. In any space that you are in, whether that's on an executive board, whether you are the president of the board, if you are volunteering, if you are at a service project, whatever space you're in, you must practice diversity. You must practice inclusion in order to become excellent at it. It has to be habitual. It has to be something that we do every single day, which means we must practice it every single day. And I would also like to note that was my third word, excellence. Excellence, courtesy of Peyton Manning. Slide, please. Courtesy of Peyton Manning, who was just inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame. So here are just a few examples of the benefits of diversity on your board, the benefits of diversity on your committee. Diversity and inclusion on your board and committee will always enhance your organization. It will never hurt your board, or the nonprofit organization that you are representing. If you have diversity on your board, it will expand knowledge, experience, and insight that goes into a nonprofit's decision making. A board has to have diverse experiences, diverse histories to advocate for a diverse community. And that is one of the responsibilities of an advisory board, an executive board, a committee, a council member, is to advocate for your community. But in order to advocate, and I mean truly advocate for your community, you have to look like your community. You have to sound like your community. You have to think like your community. And these are just a few of the benefits of having diversity on your committee. It inspires creativity, attract and retain the best talent, fosters innovation, expands knowledge. These are just a very few of the benefits of having diversity on your advisory committee. Now, as board members, you are caught, and I completely understand this. You are caught you are culturally caught in between this cross-pollination, this movement from what America deems as traditional boards of all one race to being catapulted into the modern age of diversity and inclusion in leadership positions. Now, there are several boards that I have given training to where everyone on the board is African American. And that does not benefit the community because the community is not all African American. There are boards that I've given training to where everyone on the board are Hispanic members. And that does not benefit the community because everyone in the community is not Hispanic. So when I say diversity, I truly mean diversity on your boards and on your community and on your committees. Your boards and your committees should not just reflect one ethnicity. And this is where that leadership piece comes into play. You have to be able to look at your board and see that my board is either diverse and inclusive, or as the leader, you have to be able to look at your board and see that my board is not diverse, my board is not inclusive, and then make a plan to do something about that. Make a plan to do something about that. You are sitting at the table where the decision making is happening for your organization. I ask you to let other people who don't look like you, who don't sound like you, and who don't think like you, the opportunity to sit at the table and make decisions as well. Slide, please. It will only be beneficial to you. And this is a quote by President Barack Obama. He wasn't president when he wrote this, The Audacity of Hope. He says, but our democracy might work a bit better if we recognize that all of us possess values that are worthy of respect. So that means people of color possess value that they can bring to your board and to your committee. People with special needs or mental health disabilities possess value that is worthy of respect and can bring that value to your board and to your committee. But you have to give them the opportunity to come to the table and help with decision making. Slide, please. Now, before we get to my FAQs, and these are questions that I routinely get, so I wanted to answer these questions and then give you the opportunity to ask other questions. But before I get to that, I gave you the definition of diversity and I gave you the definition of inclusion, the dictionary definition of that. But I want to give you kind of like a common man definition of diversity and inclusion before we go. So diversity, the common man definition of that is being invited to the dance or being invited to the prom, being invited to a lunch date or a dinner date. That would be diversity. So you are inviting other people who don't look like you, who don't sound like you, who don't think like you into your space. So that could be your executive board, that could be your advisory council, that could be your volunteer organization. So you are inviting them into that space. That is diversity. The common man definition of inclusion is when they get to that party, when they get to the prom, that you ask them to dance. So you are including them in the party. You are including them into the prom. It's not enough just to invite them to the dance. It's not enough just to invite them to the table, but you have to include them when they get there. Don't ostracize them when they get there. Don't make them feel unimportant. Don't make them feel unseen. Let them know that I invited you here because I value what you have to say. I value your experiences. And you do that by asking questions, taking their thoughts and their opinions seriously, and incorporating that into your organization, into your volunteer pool, into your boards as well. So again, the common man definition of diversity, inviting them to the dance. The common man definition of inclusion, asking them to dance when they get there. And I don't know about you, but I have been to dances and I have been to parties where the person that invited me, they invite me and then they leave. They go off with their friends, they go off and they dance, they go off and they do whatever. And it left me feeling really alone and really embarrassed. And I felt like they shouldn't have even invited me here. If they were just going to invite me and leave, they should not even have invited me to the dance. So don't invite someone to the space that you're in and then leave them there. Invite them and then include them when you do. So here are some of Crystal's frequently asked questions. Number one, what if my community is not diverse? I get this question all the time. What if I live in a community that's not diverse? What do I do? The answer is very simple. Go to the next community. Go to the next city. Go to the next county. There is diversity all around you. You just have to make the effort to seek it out, to go and find it. Don't let something like city limits stop you from having the best at your table. And I want to tell you a little story about this. Now, the community that I live in is very diverse, and I am grateful that it is. But there are communities around where I live that are not diverse at all. And my nonprofit agency covers 3 counties. So that's a lot of cities within those 3 counties. And what I did, because I wanted my organization and my board to be diverse, I drove 2 hours round trip to go recruiting for diversity outside of my community where I live and work. But it was a community that was covered under my organization. I drove 2 hours, so it's 1 hour there, 1 hour back to recruit for diversity. And I did this more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times because it was a priority to me. So if you do not live in a community that is diverse, and I get that, I understand that, go to the next community, go to the next city, go to the next county and find diversity there. It has to be a priority for your organization, for your board to be diverse. And if it's a priority, you will drive to wherever you need to drive to. Number 2, how do I recruit for diversity? There are several, and I mean several ways to recruit for diversity. Now, I gave several steps in the last training that I did with Lily and the Arizona Food Banks. That was back in May. So if you have time, once this training is over, please go and find that video and watch that video, because I gave several steps and I really expanded on how to recruit for diversity. But the number one way that I will give you for today is go introduce yourself. Go to their neighborhoods, go to social groups, go to civic groups, go introduce yourself, let them know who you are, let them know what you are doing. It is your responsibility, just like it was my responsibility when I was recruiting diversity, to go into those neighborhoods, to go into those communities and introduce myself and let them know who I was and what I was doing. Now, when you do something like this, when you're going into a different community or you're going into a different neighborhood, you have to do this more than once. Don't just go one time and say, I tried. Don't just go twice and say, I tried. When I first became director and I started actively and intentionally recruiting for diversity, I would say it took me about a year before I was able to say that this community trusted me, that this community knew who I was, because I repeatedly went back all the time. I went to the meetings, I went to their events. If they invited me to speak at something, I made sure and I went, because it was a priority for me to know them and for them to know me. And once I established trust with them, once I established rapport with these other communities, I didn't even have to ask, do you want to be a part of my advisory council? Do you want to come and volunteer for my organization? They started volunteering it themselves and started asking me, I would love to be on your board. I would love to come and volunteer for your organization. I started getting the phone calls. I started getting the emails. And that was because I made it a priority, and I put in the energy, I put in the excellence when it came to recruiting for diversity. I also showed empathy, understanding that these communities, a lot of times, they are not invited to the dance. They are not invited to the table. So when I first went and they were just kind of nonchalant, I didn't take it personal, because I understood where they were coming from. I showed empathy to them because I understood a lot of times people are not coming to your neighborhoods. People are not coming to these communities. People are not volunteering their time and their energy in these communities. So when it took me a year to do it, I was okay with it. But eventually they started coming to me. So how do you recruit for diversity? The number one way is go to those communities, go to those neighborhoods, make yourself available, introduce yourself, and then they will come to you. Now, number 3, I get this question more times than I even can count. And it's usually this specific question. Do I select the African American or do I select the best candidate? So even though the question a lot of times is, do I select the African American? You can substitute that and say, do I select the Hispanic person or do I select the best candidate? Do I select the Caucasian person or do I select the best candidate? Do I select the female or do I select the best candidate? So you can interchange African American for either one that you would like. And simply put, the answer is yes. Yes, you do. And I will explain that. Now, there are so many things wrong with this question, but I'm going to explain it and answer it at face value. Whether you think it or say it out loud, there is not a separation of people of color and intelligence. People of color are the best candidates, just like Caucasian people are the best candidates as well. You do not have to settle, for example, for a person of color over an intelligent person. People of color are smart. People with disabilities are smart. People with mental health issues are smart and intelligent and knowledgeable. And just like President Obama said, they all have value. We all have value. So to answer the question again, do I select the African American candidate or do I select the best candidate? That answer is a resounding yes, because there is not a separation of the two. And the African American candidate is the best candidate, just like the Hispanic candidate is the best candidate, just like the Caucasian candidate is the best candidate, just like the male candidate is the best candidate. There is not a separation of the two. You can and will have both on your advisory council, your executive board, your volunteer pool, your service organization. You can and will have both. There is not a separation of either one. Slide, please. And this is such an important quote. Talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. So we all have some kind of talent, whatever that is, whether it's athletic talent or maybe you are bilingual, that is a talent. Maybe you're an artist, that's a talent. Maybe you're a mathematician, that's a talent. We all have some kind of talent that we can bring to the table. But a lot of times we are not given the opportunity to bring our talent to the table. A lot of times we are not given the opportunity to show our value. A lot of times we are not given the opportunity to be seen or be heard. So I am going to ask every person that is listening and watching this training to make sure and give other people an opportunity at the table. Give people who don't look like you the opportunity. Give people who don't sound like you the opportunity. Give people who are disabled, who have mental health, give them the opportunity to bring their knowledge to the table, to bring their experiences to the table, to bring their intelligence and intellect to the table, and your organization will be better for it. Your executive board, your advisory council will be better for it. Slide, please. As I wrap up our training, I would ask that everyone stay social with me. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Crystal Petry Consulting. I give a lot of videos on varying topics on there. You can also email me if you have any questions after this training. I know a lot of times once the training is over, you think of questions like, I should have asked her this, I should have said this, I should have commented this. You can email me even after this presentation, and I promise you I will respond to you. And if need be, I will even pick up the phone and call you. So, slide please. And here is a great part of my training that I always enjoy, the question and answer. So any questions that you have, please put those in the chat. I will check to see if we have any questions kind of throughout the presentation. I don't have any questions that we'll put in throughout the presentation, but if you have questions, if you have a comment, go ahead and put that in the chat and I will answer your comment. I will respond to your question. And I do want to make note that I was able to use all 4 of my E words throughout my presentation. So let's go back to those E words. We had excellence. I used that when I was talking about my favorite NFL player, Peyton Manning. We have energy. We have enjoy. I was talking about I do give that speech when I'm speaking with a potential advisory council member. And empathy. When you go to neighborhoods and communities of people who don't look like you, make sure you are empathetic to them if they are not so inviting the first time you go or inviting the second time you go, understanding that a lot of people don't go to those communities and don't go to those neighborhoods. So when stranger danger, if you will, someone new comes into the neighborhood, they have every right to be apprehensive. But because you listen to this training, you're going to go back again and again and again because it is a priority to you and to your organization. And again, if you have any questions or any comments, please drop those in the group chat as we're talking. And as we're waiting for questions and comments, I can turn it over to you now, Lily.
Great. Thank you so much, Crystal. Yes, if anyone has any further questions, please just write it in the chat. I know I learned so much information from this training and the volunteer training that we did earlier. I will also email you all that link to that training as well. But just having a board, having a volunteer pool that represents the people you serve is so, so important. So thank you, Crystal. We are so happy to have you come give us more information.